We have an excellent talk on the local violets. Arieh Tal, who is a botanist and an excellent botanical photographer and long laboring botanical educator with over 30 years experience as a field botanist. He's taught many classes on field identification of various plants. In my experience, particularly those in the Asteraceae, has conducted numerous workshops and has led countless field trips for various local groups. So the violets of our region, Arieh Tal, thank you. Thank you.
Can this come down? So what do I do with it? Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome, friends. Preparing a talk like this is kind of like preparing a Thanksgiving dinner. It takes a long time to prepare. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Let me see if I can turn off the lights over here.
Okay. And then it's over in an hour, or this. So I was cloistered for the last month, working day and night. I don't want to complain. I learned a lot, and I hope you enjoy this tonight. Anyway,
Sorry.
the floor of the Cayuga Lake Basin. That's where we are, and a long time ago, about 100 years ago or even more, these two professors, Wiegand and Eames, and others on the faculty and their students went forth to see what the heck is out there in the Finger Lakes region as far as plants are concerned. And they brought back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of specimens and classified them and argued over them and published articles and whatever. And then they published this book, The Flora of the Cayuga Lake Basin. And if you look at the listings in there for violets, they're pretty much what we have today. The names have been changed for some of them, but there are not too many new ones on the horizon around here. And this is the area that I decided I should be responsible for, and primarily because we have members who live in some of these counties, and it wouldn't be right to just concentrate on Tompkins County, because there are people in Onondaga County who tune into these meetings, Tioga, Broome, Schuyler, and so forth. So that's what I set for myself. As I mentioned, I can't move this black bar around, can I?
Exit out. Exit out.
Is it okay to exit out? Okay, I didn't want to end the presentation here. Anyhow, as I said, and they started collecting well before, but around look at that, from 1910 to 1919, they collected as many specimens as they did before and after that. So that was the golden age of exploration and collecting of specimens. And it's not just the violets, but just about everything that grows and is found in the wild. And so they did their work and they did it well. Here's a blow up of that, so to say. Now, most of my data comes from specimens. That's all we have, really. Vouchers. And that's what tells us what should be out there in the wild. And so one of the conclusions that, well, it's hard to make a lot of conclusions from this because there's so many empty cells. And one here, two there, and so forth. So it's hard to say exactly what is out there today. Probably not as much as there was 100 years ago. I'm sorry to say. Things were the world that they saw then was a lot richer than it is today. A lot fewer highways, a lot fewer buildings, and so forth. Anyhow, most of these specimens were at Cornell's Bailey Hortorium, and I was able to run queries against their database and
put these things together here. For some reason, Binghamton chooses to keep their specimens separate, which is fine. And I was able to get those data from the NIFA website. They list vouchers for each species that they're tracking. What other conclusions can we say? Well, probably Viola odorata is probably pretty uncommon around here. And so I'm trying to pick up the, what can I say? The lowest ones, Viola pallens. Now it's interesting, they collected a lot more Viola blanda than they did of Viola pallens, which is a darn similar species. And I'm not sure whether that means blanda is much more common than pallens, or is that, I don't know what it means. But 134 specimens of blanda and only 50 of pallens. So it's a third, yeah.
Just wondered, there's so many more for Tompkins County. Is that just because of the more Cornell people went out?
Yeah, that was basically it. I mean, they did a darn good job for Tompkins County, but think about what happened 120, 130 years ago. If you wanted to go up to Cayuga County or to Seneca County or something, to the northern areas, you got out and there was a black car on your driveway and it had a crank, and you cranked it like this to start your car and get it going. And that's what they drove around in those Model T Fords. It's hard to imagine that today when we've got screens on our cars and you could look backwards while driving forwards and all that. But that's what and that's part of the problem, is by the time they got to Junius Ponds or something like that, and did a couple hours worth of botanizing, it was time to come home. Anyway, I don't know if blanda is really the most common violet. The next one to that would probably be Ceraria, was it? Ceraria with 88, and then Cuculata 89. So anyway, violets. This is what I think violets are, and I hope you agree. Most are herbaceous perennials, a few are annuals. Most are native to North America. The annuals are not. Most are rhizomatous, but the annuals are taprooted. Some also produce stolons, most do not, surprisingly. All species are shorter than 16 inches, sometimes barely reaching 3 inches. Viola pallens, for example, yes.
Did you search the consortium of Herbaria online?
Norm asked if I searched the consortium of Herbaria. I certainly did. But in the time frame to be contacting these people and having them send me a data sheet.
No, there's a computerized thing. You can just put in the species you want.
It didn't seem to work for me, Norm. I don't know why. I'm into technology and things, but it's certainly not like logging into BH's database and boom, boom, boom. You got all the specimens with all the data. It's not quite that easy. Anyhow, a majority are stemless. Some have stems, and I'll explain what that's about in a little bit. For the stem species, the leaves are alternate. Flower parts are in 5 petals, 5 sepals, 5 stamens. Many grow in the shade of a forest, but seem to be more prolific with a small amount of daily sunlight. Those violets that are growing in deep shade just don't do as well as the ones that get a little bit of sun. And most prefer mesic environment or wetter in some cases, like Cuculata, but not like inundated. Violets are good citizens. They live in harmony with their plant communities. They don't try to take over. Even if they tried to, they probably wouldn't succeed. They're frail little plants, and they probably would have. But anyhow, they don't really, you don't see large populations of them like the trilliums sometimes, or the bloodroots, or so many other plants that really just take over the area. They're here, small populations here and there, a few plants, and they're enjoyable to see, but you don't see like a big landscape of it. I did see a picture on the NIFA Plants Atlas. I think it was Kyle Webster took a picture of some place here in Tompkins County with a whole forest full of viola blanda. So anyway, but this is what I was able to do up in Vermont around Lake Champlain. If you saw a colony like that, I think you were doing pretty darn well as far as violets are concerned. Anyway, everybody wants to know, when do they bloom? Well, the specimen labels are a good proxy for that. They make sense anyway. People go out when they're in flower and they collect or take pictures. And if you look at it, the month of May is basically the peak for violets. Now with global warming, that may change, but especially the middle of May is like, wow, everybody is out there collecting specimens. And then it drops off. And surprisingly, they're collecting specimens of violets until October. Now, why would they do that? Any guess? Well, yeah, to collect seeds, yes. Because fruit is a good identifier. And so if you go out in August or September or even October, if you're lucky, October, you could, and they have specimens of those in fruit later on. And you could see the stolons and the rhizomes and so forth. So, but obviously May, even though they're blooming now outside, May is the time really to go gangbusters on that. All right, a little bit of morphology here, and then we'll get on to some other things. Anyway, the corolla. There are two upper petals. The lateral petals are on the sides, and the lower petal is called the spur petal because it connects to the spur, which is in the back of the corolla. In the middle here, number 4 is beard hairs. You can see that better than I can up there than I can on my computer. The throat is called this area in here where the bee lands and crawls inside. That's the landing pad there, so to say. So that's the basic morphology of a viola flower. On the side, it's important to look at the sides of violets when you're trying to identify them. You can't really identify it very well without looking at the side. You need to see the peduncle. I always think of a peduncle in violets as like a walking cane that has a curved handle, and that's kind of what it is for the violets. And want to see whether the peduncle is hairy or not hairy. You want to look at the calyx, which is the collection of sepals in the back, to see whether they're narrow or broad, or whether they have cilia on the margins and so forth. And the spur petal is identified there. And that actually connects all the way through the base of the flower and into the back, into the spur. And when you get photographs of these things, you see little holes in them all the time. Little holes in the spurs that somebody decided to cheat and they came by and got the nectar without pollinating anything. All right, beard hairs, important to look at. This above here is Viola sororia, and it's got a very dense coating of hairs on the inside of the lateral petals. And most of the species that have hairs are going to be on the lateral petals. It's not too common to see a species with hairs on the spur petal. It does happen, but it's not very common. This here, I think, is Viola labradorica, if I'm not mistaken. No, labradorica doesn't have a beard. That's probably what that is. And this here looks to me like a hybrid. It looks to me like a Viola X Bicellii that has those. And take a look at the hairs. Well, the first one was really long hairs. The second one are really short hairs. And this one has in between. And sororia has, it's probably X Bicellii is a hybrid of cuculata and sororia. And so the hairs are halfway in between both of those. So and cuculata, see how the hairs are knobbed? That's a very distinctive thing. And if you find something like that, you know it's got to be one of two things. It could be cuculata or it could be X Bicellii. Stop me if you have any questions.
Hairs have a function?
What?
The hairs have a function.
Yeah, it's, they collect the pollen on their way out, and then that's how it gets pollinated. The hairs are like a brush, you know, and they brush against the sides of the insect and bring the pollen in and out. Smart. Anyhow, spurs, they're also important, and you see those on the side as well. A short spur would look something like this, which barely exceeds the sepals. A medium-sized spur, the first one is Viola pallens, second one is Viola labradorica. A medium-sized spur, and then a really, really long spur, a Viola rostrata, which is named appropriately the long-spurred violet. So take a look at that. These are things that are easy to see just walking by, and maybe if you have a close focusing binocular, so you don't have to get down on the ground or whatever, you can see some of our camera. Capsules, that's what an immature capsule looks like, and when it's mature, it splits open into 3 parts like that. And I always look at these things like little bowling balls in a rack. They're either bowling balls or cannonballs or marbles or something along the lines like that. So anyhow, that's a ripe capsule of Viola tricolor, the Johnny Jump Up, ready to disperse its seeds. I guess the other thought about violets that I have is why they're not more prolific like some others, is maybe those seeds are too heavy for the ants to carry. So they fall nearby, they don't blow away in the wind. They fall nearby, the ants eat the iliosome and just leave it where it is because they can't carry it back to their nest. I'm thinking that, but I don't know. It's one hypothesis. But they're small plants and they don't have big elbows either, so they don't. All right, leaves. Everybody makes big deal of the leaves. All right, well, this is the leaf blade, as they call it, and this is the petiole or stalk, leaf stalk. The base of the blade is called the leaf base. But yeah, but you read the literature, it says bases are this and the bases are that, you know, cordate, for example. That's a heart shape or cordate leaf. And there's 2 lobes here. And those are the lobes, these are the lobes, and the notch in between is also called a sinus. That's a narrow notch. This is a wider notch. And in some cases, the notches are so wide, they almost don't exist at all, which we'll see in a minute. This is what's called an ovate or egg-shaped leaf. Okay, this is Viola cuculata. The left one here is what's called a kidney-shaped leaf. It's in the shape of a kidney bean or a lima bean or somebody's kidney. And on the right hand, there's many names for that. You call it circular, or you could they call it in the literature orbicular. I call them rotund. Orbicular to me implies a sphere, and these are not spherical. They're 2-dimensional kind of things. So I call it rotund. It's a valid name. There's a species named after that, Viola rotundifolia. Lance-shaped leaves. Now, we don't have any of these here, Viola lanceolata. But if you travel to the eastern part of the state or to certain areas where they're common, you may encounter this. And just be aware that there's a violet like this with white flowers that looks like some other ones you're familiar with that just doesn't have those heart-shaped leaves. And this is one of 2, lanceolata and primulifolia are the 2 that don't have those heart-shaped leaves. Here in the lower picture, Viola sagittata, Ver sagittata, is a lance-shaped leaf, but it's different than the one above in that the one above here tapers, the base of the leaf tapers to the petiole gradually, okay? Whereas this one has lobes at the base, and it's almost as wide down here as it is in the middle here. So be on the lookout for lobes on the leaves. There's one, a truncate base, which means it's like someone took a scissors and cut the lobes off. It's flat on the bottom. It looks like, what's it called? Populus deltoides leaves, something like that. These are really lobed leaves here, and that's the Ola subsinuata, I believe. And now there's two types of lobes used in the literature, and I have to grapple with that, and I don't agree with it, but that's just what it is. They call lobes something, two things. The lobes on the sides of the leaves, like along here, that's lateral lobes there, and then there's a terminal lobe here, lateral lobes and terminal. But the other lobes at the base, they also call them lobes, but they call it cordate. So anyway, it's just something in the literature, and see, there's a very wide notch right here. There's a very wide notch and so forth there. Okay, what species of violet would you think this might be?
Are we sure it's a violet?
Well, what do other people think? Do you raise your hand? How many think it's a violet, and how many think it's something else? Oh, how many think it's a violet? Raise your hands. Well, okay, you spoiled everything.
I'm sorry.
Violets don't have a monopoly on heart-shaped leaves. What other plants have heart-shaped leaves? What? Asters, of course, my favorite. Okay, that's Aster macrophyllus or Eurybia macrophyllus leaves. Well, a little bit. I think the asters have more sharply toothed leaves on them than the violets do. The violet leaves are pretty small. But if it's midsummer and you see something like this, don't say it's a violet necessarily. It might be something else. What?
Especially if it's a tree.
Well, actually, Eurybia macrophylla can grow like this high off the ground, like nothing but a mass of leaves, and only 1 out of 10 of those can produce a stalk. But I mean, that's a thought. But anyway, what to look for in the field? Are the plants stemmed or stemless? That's the first thing you should look for. Obviously, the petals. What's the color of the petals? We're going to start cutting down here the number of possibilities with each step here. Are the petals yellow? And there's 2 species only in our area, white or bluish purple. Right now, I'll tell you, the bluish purple is the most common. I would guess that genetically it's the dominant color for violets, and white is a mutation and yellow is a mutation. Just given the number of species that have blue as opposed to the rest. Are the lateral petals bearded or not? It's not too hard to see that. How long and short are the spurs? You know, 3 categories, short, long, medium, and long is good enough, and really long. Do the plants spread by stolons or not? Now you'll have to look for that a little bit. But if you see another plant like growing like a foot away from the other one, and then another one like there, you might think that there are stolons that are letting these plants multiply like that. Most of the species in this list that I'm going to show you do not make stolons. Blanda and palens do. Renifolia does not. Odorata makes stolons, and I think maybe only one other one on the list. Are the leaves ovate, egg-shaped, kidney-shaped, or rotund? For the plants that we have around there, that's pretty much going to define what it is, with the exception of the 2 annuals, Johnny Jump Ups and Viola arvensis, that don't have those heart-shaped, ovate, kidney, rotund leaves. Schematics. I know how to use big words too here. An outline, a synopsis. What I'm going to show you in a minute, in a few seconds here, is a diagram, a synoptical, cinematic diagram of what to look for when you're out in the field. And I have a handout here that's going to give you a paper copy of it. That's what you're going to see on the screen. I'm not giving it to you now because the people who are not attending in person aren't going to get one. So, but they can get it if you're listening. You can get it off my website. Anyway, so that's what this is. And this is where it all comes together at this point. And I'm laying it out just like that because I have 2 keys on my website, and this is the logic that
that really defines what's happening in those keys. All right, groups, and I've grouped the plants in different in order. Stemmed, leaves are various but not heart-shaped. Annuals from taproots, Viola arvensis and Viola tricolor. Arvensis looks like that. It's usually these two annual ones have multiple colors: blue, yellow, white, and so forth. And they have very long sepals. So that's Viola arvensis. I'm taking one from each category because it would get too tedious otherwise. Viola blanda, okay, stemless. I'm sorry, I jumped on. Group 2, stemmed, leaves heart-shaped perennials from a rhizome. And Viola canadensis. It's a tall, stately plant, probably one of the showier ones. And notice that canadensis has a yellow coloration right here in the throat. Some other violets do that too, but canadensis does it in a nice way. And on the back, they have purple. Okay. So what defines these flowers is that the face of the flower is flat, like that, more or less. Some of the other violets, the face is leaning forward and the lateral petals are leaning forward. Canadensis has a flat face, like that. And then looking at it from the back, it looks like that. I'll mention leaf axil here. This is an axil of a leaf. It's a place where new leaves or branches arise. And that is, for a stemmed violet, that is where the stalks of the violets come out of the leaf axils. Okay. Cuculata, marsh blue violet. Usually those are close to bodies of water, whether it's at the edge of a pond or a stream bank or something. It's usually kind of mucky kind of place, and they like to keep their feet with. One of the things to look for on Viola cuculata is that the flowers are elevated above the leaves, noticeably so. In other words, the peduncles, or the stalk of the flower, are longer than the petioles of the leaves. And so they elevate the flowers way up there. And you see it like this. And also cuculata tends to have a dark blue circle here around. And notice the short hairs here. I couldn't get a real clear picture of that because there wasn't enough detail. It tends to be kind of a glabrous plant. Not a lot of hairs on cuculata, the leaves or the flowers or the sepals or anything. Okay, I'm going to go back because people should have complained. All right, so what do we look for in group 2? Corolla, I'll tell you what the major characters are. So in group 2, corollas are white, white, blue, blue, and yellow. So there's 5 of those in the native group around here. 2 white, 2 blue, and 1 yellow. Low-hanging fruit. Check to see, okay, the corolla color, whether it's bearded or not, and the spurs, whether they're long or short. Okay, so I've divided them out, and in the key, you'll get the details for these here. Group 3, stemless. Corollas white, margins unlobed. Spurs are 1 to 3 millimeters long. So all those in group 3 have really short spurs, and they're all white flowered species. And they're darn hard to identify. And part of the problem is that the botanists that write the books, say, well, it usually has beard hairs, or it usually doesn't,
Or, you know, it's like hedging their bets. Well, gosh, they shouldn't be that hard, but because they share characteristics and they share the same types of leaves and the same types of flower characteristics. Only one of those in that group is not stoloniferous, and that's renifolia. And the others are stoloniferous. And once you get past that group, practically none of the rest has stolons. What about this group?
How's Peterson's field guide for the violets?
What?
How is Peterson's field guide? How's the treatment of the violets?
It's not too bad. I mean, I haven't seen it.
They have all these species that we have.
Yeah, I think so. Most of them, yeah. They would what?
Say no.
What?
They say no.
Oh, there's two species in this group, Lanceolata and Primulafolia. They're not in our area. These are the ones that don't have heart-shaped leaves, and they are in New York, however, and I have seen them and photographed them. I did check those, Newcomb's guide and Peterson's guide, and that wasn't my primary source. I just wanted to see whether, and those three, Blanda, Palens, and Renifolia, are all there. And most of the other ones as well. The names, the species, the scientific names are changed in many cases. Okay, but they are there. Take it along. What the heck? It does not going to hurt. But just remember that the names are not going to be, in some cases, what we have today. Peterson's guide is neat because they show little arrows. Do this or that. All right, group 4. So mercifully, it's a small group. Group 4 are stemless violets with corollas that are blue, violet, or purple, and the margins are unlobed. So remember the picture of the cucullator that I showed you before? They may have little teeth, but they don't have these lobes that stick out like that. So they're heart-shaped leaves and egg-shaped and whatever. Cucullator, speaking of which, they're like that, no lobes. Okay, no lobes on the sides of the leaves. And what are we looking for here? Whether it's bearded or not, whether they're stoloniferous or not. And odorata is the only one that's stoloniferous. That's the lawn violet that's not native, and it's wickedly hairy, very, very hairy plant, unlike some of the other ones there. So no stolons to look for. The spurs, some of them are really short, and some of them are moderately long. Selkirkii has a moderate sized spur, and so does odorata. Group 5, same as above, except that the margins are lobed. Not stoloniferous, and spurs are short for all of these. What I've done here is it brings these things together in a way that makes sense, at least to me, and I hope to you as well. I don't know that these are phylogenetic groups per se, but they look like they could be. All the white ones with the small white flowers, you know, together in a group, and the ones with the unlobed in a group, and the ones with the big lobes in a group with bluish flowers. So these are all lobed, blue violet, not stoloniferous, with short spurs. And what you need to do when you take this list is just find the one in that 4 or 5 that matches what you have. And if you hit the nail on the head, then you're lucky. If you'll only have to compare it with one other thing because it's so close to what you've seen that it's going to be real close to that. That's when you open up Peterson's guide and take a look at what Peterson gave you, or my keys online. My keys are written, one of the keys is written so that you can use it on a cell phone or a tablet. Pedata, the birdfoot violet, is not around here, but it's a beautiful violet, and it's not bearded. Spurs, okay, the last one. Palmeda. How many have seen viola palmeda? Well, if you want to see one, go over to Monday. Monday Wildlife, there's one growing on the lawn outside
It's
Bob's.
really substituted.
I was told that it was palmeda.
I was guessing that everything we have been calling palmada is really substituted, but I haven't examined. it.
Well, I mean, it fits what I photographed because the early leaves don't have lobes and the later leaves do. And so a lot of the specimens of palmada that were collected by the faculty 100 years ago were probably, a lot of those could have been subsinuated. In those days, they didn't know anything about subsinuated. That was like in the last 20 years that was pulled out of palmada. And so on that list that I showed you a while before, palmada was fairly common, but I bet you a third or a fourth of those or half are maybe subsinuated. And rotundifolia is in the last all by itself. It's a stemless violet with yellow corollas and ovate to rotund leaves. It's a very beautiful violet and it could be blooming right now. And bright yellow, very bright yellow. And it's kind of hairy. And in the summer, when the flowers go by, the leaves expand and they're twice the size as they were in spring. And they just lay on the ground flat. And you'll see, oh, what's that? You know, looks like that. And there's not much of a notch. But that's, you know, that's a sign that you've got viola rotunda. That's what I call rotund down there. Okay. That is my scheme. Let's take a look at something else. Are there any questions at this point before I go on to something else? Yeah, Bob.
I think I noticed something that might be useful to people. The aster basal leaf that you had that was violet leaf shaped, the tip of those leaves were a bit more acuminate than any of the violet leaves.
That is true, yeah.
Is that a useful feature?
It is. The aster leaves, for the woodland asters,
Point drawn out to a
long drawn out point. The ones that grow in the woods, like the whitewood aster and the large leaved aster, they are more pointed, but not always, Bob. But I mean, especially the Eurybia divaricata, that is really, really a long kind of leaf. Symphyotricum cordifolium, the heart-leaved aster, and the teeth are more coarse. Usually people forget about the violets by the time the asters come out, you know. Yes.
That's very common. Aster that's all over, violet that's all over lawn, is that this?
Well, the question was, what's the common violet that's all over lawns that I'm seeing right now? My guess is that there are two candidates for that. One is odorata, a sweet, it's called the sweet violet from England, wherever. Odorata, if it's really hairy, densely hairy, then it could be odorata. And the other one, if it doesn't have many hairs at all, or maybe a few, is Ceraria. Okay, Ceraria is a very, it doesn't smell, it could be white or bluish white or blue or purple. Those are the two that I would guess. Those are the two that have adapted to human disturbance more so than the rest that like to stay in the woods or in wetter habitats. Okay.
See if you got questions from the online.
What? Are there questions online?
Donna asking, how come they find the violet fields?
What did you say?
How come you find the violet fields?
You mean my pictures? Any? Oh my God. Go to Google.
No, we're trying to get to yours.
The key they want to know.
Oh, key. You can go to my website.
Yeah, how do you get?
We're gonna get there. Follow the yellow brick road. All right, I'm gonna go out to my website. Here, just type in
spot photo.
That's spelled right.
Darn laptops. And .info. Ta-da, and that's my website, live from the internet. Let me give you a, this picture is going to change. And notice the leaves here of this rotundifolia. They're kind of like glandular leaves, tip leaves. They're different than the aster leaves. I'll give you a quick rundown about this. This tab here gets you the species descriptions. Each species that I have cataloged here has its own page with more details than you probably want. And pictures. So you go there. So I'm currently working with 2 plant families, and I hope to add another family someday, at least. Composites, which I'm not going to go into tonight. Violets. So click on violets. Okay, and that is birchfoot violet. Beautiful violet. Okay, so anyhow, and hit the home button to get back to the home page, or go back to the previous page with plant families. There's an index to species and violet resources. Let me just show you one specimen here. So this is the one with the violets, and up above at the top of this page is the scientific names. And there's a little arrow here that you wonder, what's that there for? Boom. And you go down to see the English names down there. And then just scroll back up to see the same page, but you get to see all these English names. Some of these scientific with the species have more than one common name. You know, like the ovate leaf violet, let's see what that is. Sagittata. I mean, they all have ovate leaves, right? But that's what it's called.
You know, taxonomists are always doing it. They're separating the common name from the scientific name. And the user always wants to see the scientific name next to the common name.
I'll make a note of that and for the future, Norm. Okay. All right. So pick a species, name a species, and I'll bring up
Striata.
striata. And so I give you a flora of North America kind of description up here.
It's a common name.
What the common name is over here. It's got 2 common names. Okay. And that's a habit picture of that. It's a leafy kind of, it's what kind of violet is that? What? Stemmed violet. Okay, stemmed. This is what the flowers look like, and differs from canadensis in that it doesn't have a yellow patch in the throat. It's long, it has long haired beards, and it's a fairly glabrous plant, and what, medium to small spur, and its leaves look kind of like that. I don't know.
Well, I think it depends on the shape of the center, the lower petal of that flower is really long, but would you find that in most?
A question is the length of the spur petal relative to the side lateral petals diagnostic? To a degree it is, and I've come across that in Gleason and Cronquist's manual. Let me take a look at another one. We'll see. They are different, you know, and so this here, this is the peduncle, this is the petiole, this is the leaf axil, and that's a stipule down there. I'm going to go to Viola labradorica and see what I come up with. Okay, so we go back up and just hit the back button on your browser. We're going to go to here and see, is this the one that has? No, they're pretty much the same length as the lateral ones and the other ones. Let's see, well, what about cucullator? Personally, I never felt, nope. Bob, what do you think? Which one has a longer spur petal than the there you go. Well, maybe not. It can be diagnostic, but not necessarily.
So Turkey eye has a fatter spur than the others.
Yeah. You see, most of them are pretty much equal in
there is one of these, and it's off the top of my head, I can't remember.
So your key is to the Finger Lakes, right? But the list is.
Yeah, these are all in the Finger Lakes,
Oh,
not necessarily in any one spot or one county. Anyhow, it is diagnostic. Take a look at maybe Newcomb's Guide, or if you like, if you feel comfortable using Gleason and Cronquist, and they do mention that. I just off the top of my head, I can't remember that, but I didn't give that as one of the criteria to use when you're out in the field. As you take a look at these, most of them are kind of the same. There's a synonym list. If you see a name that there, it came up. There you go. I gave you. You can download this list also, and on the left is the synonyms of what we're including today, and on the right is the accepted names in today's world that we live in. But like Viola blanda used to be called Viola incognita, Palens, McCloskeyi, Palmata, Triloba, and so forth and so on. What I'd like to do now is see if I can bring up. So let's go to the resources for violets. Now, if the top here on my menu, it's going to say resources. If you're working in the Asteraceae section of the website, it'll bring up Asteraceae resources. If you're in the violet section, it'll bring up that. I didn't want to put a big name on the menu, as I said, resources. So come down. There's different things you can do here. We already saw that you could read the schematics here. You read it online on the screen, or you can download a PDF of that. I have a copy of it here for you guys. There's a traditional violet key, like that. Paper, text only, no pictures, no hand holding. Get out your glossary and so forth. And we go through the key, just like a traditional key. But you can print that out, download it, and print it out and take it with you like. Let's take a look at the the tutorial is what I already showed you tonight when I walked through the morphology of it, so we don't need to go over that. Let's take a look at what we have. It's called a species finder, and it's dichotomous. And each step I show you pictures. I'll do one from this side and one from the other side, and then we'll probably take questions. So there's 7 species in this group. These are the plants are stemmed, more than 1 flower per stem, and all petal colors are included in this. So the low-hanging fruit is the taprooted annuals. So you click on that, and you've got 2 choices. You see this, and okay, that's what it is, and you can go to that page and then see the details here. So let's go back another step here and click on this. Okay, again, low-hanging fruit. There's only one that's stemmed with the yellow flowers, and that's Viola pubescens. All right. There's another yellow one, but it's not stemmed. Plants are stemmed, flowers not yellow. Click on here. And there's 2 here and 2 there. It can't get any easier than this. I mean, 2 white ones, 2 blue ones, and 1 yellow one, stemmed. Your chances of getting it are pretty darn good. That's all I have to say. If you see a stem violet and you know it's blue, you're going to see it here. There's only 2 of them around. That's all. So click on that, and you get Labradorica and Rostrata. One's got a medium-sized spur, and the other one's got a long spur, and this one has there's no beard, and that one has a beard. Okay, now, and I give you the clues up here: stemmed, not bearded, not, and so forth. Okay, low-hanging fruit, but let's take a look at this. Canadensis. Go back over that. The yellow and the thing. Go back to here. This one, striata. No. And you up here, click previous to go back. Now we're going to tackle one of these over here. Again, these are the stemless ones. Low-hanging fruit. Yellow, there's only one. There are yellow violets elsewhere in the country, believe me, than these 2, but
For here, you don't have to worry about it. That's too easy. Let's go to here. All right, so, and let's go to here. Done. Plants are stemless, flowers are white. Click picture. So click on the picture. And these are the two that are not around here. The leaves, corollas are white, leaves are not heart-shaped. So if you're around here, forget about those. So you only have to deal with these three, white. Okay. So renifolia, kidney leaves violet. See the difference between this one has more like a pointed tip. It's not a sharp pointed tip, but this doesn't have a tip really. It's just a rounded, and that's would get you this. There's no stolons produced here, but these two do produce stolons. And these leaves are ovate, broadly ovate with a wide or narrow notch. The peduncles are reddish. Okay, so palins, blanda. The leaves of palins can look like renifolia leaves. They're both like rotundi-like things. But this one, blanda is more easy. And that's maybe why they collected so many of those, because they were a little bit easier to identify. Anyhow, let's go to viola blanda and take a look at what's happening with these, which may happen with some of the other white ones. The upper petals are bent backwards a little bit, and that's in Gleason and Cronquist and in Newcomb's and King, Peterson, well. But it's not totally diagnostic because a lot of species do that. It's not just blanda that does it. And the lateral petals, excuse me, the lateral petals are out like this, like it's ready to give you a big hug. You know, that's those two petals, the lateral petals are out. Look at it, like welcome, you know. The bee comes in, welcome.
You happen to know what kind of bees?
No, I don't know. Okay, and you can see the profile of it. The petals are, and see the reddish soft. Not always, most of the time. Palins would probably have all the palins in the area would probably have green peduncles, and the leaves are kind of heart shaped with a narrow notch and so forth. So we found that one. We can go back and we're going to click on the previous and keep going previous until you, if you're done with that. Let's do one like this here. Let's do one like that. Okay, so this isn't the hardest part of that. The white ones, I think, are the worst. Let's take a look at viola sagittata. Now, one of the things about sagittata is it tends to grow in drier areas. Like on the power line above Ithaca College. It's sandy, dry, sunny. It tends to be there. Most of the other violets tend to grow in the woods in a damper environment. Sagittata tends to be. Again, there's always exceptions. If they're in a mesic woods, then they'll have nice big clumps. If they're on sand, they're going to have a little plant like that. Plants are stemless. Flowers are blue or purple. Leaf blades are lanceolate to lance ovate, broadly lance-shaped in outline, much longer than wide. Lobes, when present, are confined to the lower fourth of the leaf, the picture. So this is variety sagittata. And notice down here at the bottom, you see the lobes at the bottom of the blade. And that's kind of distinctive for that. Take a look, a little bit better look at it. And you go to the species page, and where there's two species varieties, I give you a page for each one of those. So if you wanted to see that one here, you go to here and you read about it, and see how hairy that is. And the leaves are longer than they are wide, and you have that. And the sepals don't have silly little hairs on them. And you could read the details up here. Take one of these, and then I think we're going to call for questions here. You already saw the data. Stemless flowers are blue or purple. Lateral petals are bearded. Stamens are obscured by the hairs. Take a look at the one on the right. The stamens of violets are orange, and they're growing together. They're not connected to each other by tissue, but they are touching each other. And they're right there in line of action there. With the hairs obscure the stamens. And you really have to, I mean, I've tried this. I mean, you have to literally pull the flower apart if you really want to see what's going on inside, see the style and stigma and so forth. And that's why I didn't give you that as a criterion for doing it. I don't know how many people have the stomach to take a violet and just tear it apart like that. Just so you can see what's inside. So there's 3 species, and there's a difference there. And most of them are like this. Okay, so we go over here. This is what I'm calling palmata, Robert. Leaves are 2 different forms. Early season leaves tend to lack lobes. Later emerging leaves have evident lobes. So this one here is a little bit later on in the season. That's one of the earlier ones. Take a look at what it wants. That's growing outside your office over there.
Yeah.
That's your plant out there. That's the flower. The sepals have cilia, and well, I came at that time of year, and I don't have the pictures from later on in the year, but
No, I think you're right.
Well, they use a term homophilous. Homophilous is a plant, one kind of leaf, right? Heterophilous is the one that this is a heterophilous species, and the one on the right, there's 2 on the right are homophilous leaves. Okay, 2 species. One is around here. Britoniana is a coastal species. You could look at it just to see what it is, but it's not around here. The other one is around here, and I've seen a couple populations of it. And doesn't that look a lot like palmata leaves? And I'll bet you some of those specimens at the herbarium for palmata are really subsinuata. Okay, so anyhow, we click on this, subsinuata. Buttermilk Park on the rim trail, about halfway up the hill. Take a look along where the steep part of the hill kind of tapers off a little bit. You'll find 1 or 2 plants at the edge of the woods. It's where the rim trail goes parallel with the service road. And this is from that location. So it looks to me like, if this is an indication, is that the flowers are born below the leaves as opposed to above. With palmata, the flowers were above the leaves. Or okay, this one, if this is an indication, there weren't a lot of plants there. So this is what I have to show you. Very hairy throat here. And that's the side view of it. I think this species is hairy, and Britoniana is totally glabrous. You know, you can bring books along if you want. You can bring my list along, but I think if you've got a cell phone or a tablet or something, take a look at this, because this walks you through it step by step. Any questions?
Which ones taste the best?
Well, Norm, that depends on whether you have 4 legs or 2 legs. Okay, so think about a 4-legged herbivore that gets to about 4 or 5 feet tall, and then you'll find out, follow the herbivore, and you'll see which one tastes the most. Okay? Which one tastes the most? That's what Norm tastes better. Yes, Audrey.
We have a question from Freda, who's asking, is the pattern or color of the nectar guide consistent with the species?
Okay. The question was, is the pattern on the nectar guides consistent within the species? I would say probably yes. Take a look at this. These plants always have that. The spur petal will always have, in fact, most of these species, with the exception of Pedata, have those nectar guides. Even the purple ones have nectar guides if you look at it carefully. They just don't stand out like this. but that is like a feature of this genus, as we know it here, is the nectar guides are there, at least on the spur petal. Sometimes also on the lateral petals, it'll be fainter. They won't be quite as distinctive. I would say yes, that is that one. But they all have that. The question is, see how these are branched? They follow the veins. That purple pigment follows the veins. So in some cases, they're a little bit different. Let's see Canadensis to see what that looks like. There you go. In this case, they're straight. So that is diagnostic. I don't think you're going to find that character in any textbook anywhere. They will tell you that the lateral petals maybe are faint or something like that, and the spur petal is always more distinctive. Rotundifolia is more like the first one I showed you. Look at that, lightning coming out of the sky. So, okay, does that answer the question? Are those just, they can be. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't have much, but again, it may depend on the plant. But generally, like the white ones and this species here, they pretty reliably have those nectar guides, very distinctive against the white background. If you were to go to Viola Rostrata, let's see what Rostrata has. Again, I think this is more distinctive, to be honest with you. The blue ring around the throat there, I think that's probably more distinctive than the other thing. But let's take another look at Labradorica. Again, well, if you can figure that out and say, well, this kind of pattern and that kind of, and it works for you, then fine. Any other questions? Yes, Rosemary.
I should have asked you this a long time ago, but it just struck me, there are color forms that maybe only escaped from cultivation, I'm not 100% sure. But I'm thinking of Celoria, the Confederate violet form. And that's white stemless, but you don't have it there.
I'm not dealing with, I don't have a picture. I have a picture of Oveda with a white flower. I saw some plants like you're talking about a couple blocks from where I live, and I did get pictures of them, but I didn't know whether I'd have time to show it. But I think it's white flowered Celoria.
Yeah.
And the Confederate violet, I think, is a little bit different thing. They say that the white isn't like really bright white, it's like a grayish white. Gray and blue, like Confederate colors.
In the center of the white one.
Yeah, I mean, but these are, that could be a hybrid. And Celoria hybridizes with many things. And so when I looked at the population, I have pictures of all this, I could send you some personally. The population is the size of half of this room here. And just purple and white and purple and white and purple. I mean, that's a sign that there's something unusual going on. It's not a homopetalous kind of thing. And that's Celoria. And the textbooks will tell you that a lot of these species will produce an albino form.
Right.
But I would say if it's growing on lawns, what you want to look for Celoria is this. It's a little bit hairy, but not extensively so. The beard hairs are long, 1 millimeter or more, and they're sharp. They come to a needle-like point. Those two characteristics, and the spur is short. Those three, all right? Shorter glabrous, long hairs with pointed, and the small short spur, and white or white or purple. And the flowers don't exceed the leaves. All right.
And you haven't seen that white form out in the wild, so
It can be. Oh, it can be. It probably came at one time from that. Let's take a look at this here. Take a look at this picture. See the top picture there? Gleason and Cronquist mentioned that, and that is that with Sororia, the flowers don't exceed the height of the leaves. Whereas with Cuculata, which is another very similar, not hairy plant, they do. And so if you're comparing those two, it's not likely, in my opinion, that Cuculata is going to be found on somebody's yard, not in your yard especially.
Yeah.
If somebody lives and they have a spring in the back and there's a stream and whatever, then yeah, you might have it. But it's probably not going to be on somebody's urban lawn. My guess. It's hard. It's hard to know. There's many hybrid species. The pictures I showed you, this plant was on Buttermilk on the service road up in Buttermilk. And that's a character like it was for Britoniana and subsinuata. The leaves overtop the flowers. That's something to look for. I don't know if they'll show it to you in Newcomb's Guide or whatever. You had a question also.
I just wondered, I have a couple, is Viola odorata the only scented violet?
No, the question was, is Viola odorata the only scented violet? And I would have to say no. Let's go back to my list. It is one. My sniffer isn't that good. Let's take a look. Well, if you go down to the English names, make it easy, okay? Sweet violet. That's odorata, okay? But let's take a look at, well, I think Viola blanda tends to be kind of sweet. And it's white. But I don't think
I found in different books I've been looking at, so both Palins and Violet.
which ones?
Palins and Violet.
Palins? Palins are sweet too?
Well, you know, I haven't smelled it. It says something I was reading said it could be fragrant. So I can't vouch for it. But those are the two that I found that written evidence that they could be fragrant, Palins and Blanda.
Yeah, I mean, some people, sweet white violet, blanda, that it's called sweet white violet, blanda. I guess my sense of smell isn't that good. If I were out in a place, it's nothing like privets. You're not going to hit a scent like that, like ligustrum. When you walk along on the sidewalk and a hedge of ligustrum, there's privets, you're going to smell that. Anybody can smell that. It's pretty subtle. And because the violets don't grow in large populations, like you may not really see that a whole lot. If you want to get down on the ground and you have a good sense of smell, give it a try. I'm sure that some of them do. And odorata is one, and I think Palins or Blanda have a good chance. I'm not sure about the blue ones necessarily. If you have Johnny Jump Ups, give that a try. I'm not trying to be woolly blue violet, Sororia. It's got a little hairs on it. See the hairs on the peduncle here. See the hairs on the leaves, hairs on the stalk. That's another characteristic for Sororia. Okay, how are we doing? Any other questions? Yes.
Have you had a chance to look at any of the flowers under UV light?
No. The question was that if I ever looked at any of the flowers under.
See what the attractions, the bee trails are look like?
Well, it's whatever it is going to blow your mind.
I know that.
Yeah, whether you looked at the petals of a violet under UV light. I know that butterflies love purple, but purple to us may come out yellow for a butterfly, and it's very possible that with UV light, those purple stripes on the petals are yellow, and the white is maybe black or something else. Like, why would they have dark petals, you know, against a white background with a dark petal? It makes more sense. Okay, yeah, good question.
Fun.
What?
It would be fun.
Yeah, well, it would. I mean, if you have a lab and you have UV light in your lab, take it in. I'm going to try that. I'll go somewhere. Next time I'm at BH, I'm going to bring a violet specimen up there, and Anna will show me where there's a place where there's UV light. And I can take a look at it and see what it is. Yes, another question.
I think I've been asking this in the past. I once bought a violet cultivar, I think it's a cultivar called Freckles, and I put it down in the lawn. I've never seen, I can't get rid of it. I mean, it's really, but I don't know what.
What was it
it's
called?
It's called Freckles. It's a violet and has little spots on it. I thought it was pretty, but I just wondered, where's it from? It's not.
None of the, that doesn't,
It's a Solaria cultivar. And
So
you're right, it
it's
goes
like
crazy.
a mutation and then something.
And then somebody likes it and they say, oh, this is wonderful.
Rosemary thinks that it's a Solaria cultivar of some sort. The question was, if somebody had a violet that had speckles on it and it went crazy on their lawn. Bob, are you calling for an end of the meeting?
No.
Oh, okay, okay. Do you have a question?
No, just
Oh.
saying.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't think, I wouldn't call it speckled, but the violet that you described that has splotches of blue.
Oh, that's different.
Oh,
That's different.
that's-
Freckles really is quite polka dot.
None of these species will do that.
It may be a hybrid, but they sell it as a Solaria cultivar. And, you know, who knows how the first one got that way, but now they do seem to breed true from seed, so that probably means it's not a hybrid, it's just.
Johnny jump ups are cultivated specifically for colors,
Right.
and they have every imaginable color in the spectrum of these plants, and they're gorgeous when you get a whole population of different ones.
Yeah.
Question. When you look close up, some of the flowers of the violets remind me of iris flowers.
What?
When you look so close up at the flower of the violet, some of them remind me of iris flowers. Is there any thing to that? With all the little side hairs and the shape of the flower and the.
I didn't make that association. Are violet flowers related in any way to what was the other one? Of irises?
Yeah, I just think when you got that close to them, they look big. It just reminded me of some iris varieties.
Well, if that makes an association for you, fine, but irises are monocots and violets are angiosperms, dicots. So they're in totally different plant families. Deer like them both. That's the answer to your question, Norm.
Okay.
Which violets taste the best? Ask a deer.
Will you take questions from the Zoom audience?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, I'm always interested in the root systems of plants, and the only distinction you make is whether something is stoloniferous. There's one violet I see a lot of that the base of the plant, and it's very obvious very early spring when there's not much else to see, that at the base of the plant there's actually a cluster of bulbets, and the plant seems to reproduce by making more little plants from those bulbets, like they'll grow as a cluster. And very early spring, I think, because after winter and frost heaving, that cluster of bulbets are very obvious right at the surface of the soil. And I'm just wondering if that's special to one species or if many of them reproduce that way, but you just don't notice it because of the leaf mold in woodsy settings.
That can come from two things. That can come from a stolon, which early in season I would not expect. That's probably propagules coming off the rhizome. especially if the rhizome is more of a horizontal kind of rhizome. Rhizomes can be vertical, or they could be at an angle of one sort, or they can curve around and kind of follow the surface of the soil. And my guess is that that's what's happening to that. Take a look at the screen, your screen right now. I brought up a picture of Viola rotundifolia, and see how that is tightly clustered over there, right? And that tells me that that is an active rhizomatous species there. And the same as with Viola blanda, tends to do that more so than palens. So it is kind of a diagnostic. I'm trying to think of what other species of violet forms this great blanda is the other one I can think of that forms a big. Are you looking at the picture?
Odorata.
Yes,
Odorata does it. Yeah, thank you. Odorata does it also. Let's bring that up. And Odorata is notorious for being both stoloniferous and rhizomatous. Take a look at that. And so those are diagnostic characters that you can look at. I think Sororia, that whatever, Rosemary, that plant you told me about that I saw a few days ago that I photographed on a lawn or whatever, they form like clusters of that. And if that's Sororia, then Sororia can kind of do that. Okay, good question.
oh, so when I hear stoloniferous, I'm more familiar with stoloniferous plants that really send a lateral stolon out a good distance. So they don't really have to. They could just be going very short distances, like
Well, the
to make these
rhizome, well,
clusters.
rhizome, did everybody hear that? Yeah, some species like Odorata is known for that. And some plants have short rhizomes, some have long creeping rhizomes. Others produce short stolons and others don't. And that'll, short stolons or short rhizomes is going to give you a bushy kind of appearance with multiple stems coming out from the same. I would think that striata is kind of like that. Striata doesn't form a big clump, does it? It has multiple stems coming up from the same place on the rhizome, right?
Yeah, sort of a short, tight clump.
Yeah, a short clump like that, yes. But yeah, it's got to come from somewhere, and I don't think, I've never read anywhere that violets produce bulblets, like that. Probably not.
I'm probably giving it the wrong name, and I just didn't recognize it as a rhizome because they're just small.
Well, it's under the ground. You can't see what it is. So
Could it be a lot of seedlings?
I was thinking it could, but well, the one answer was, could it be a bunch of seedlings? It is, because those little cannonballs fall right next to the parent plant. So the
Yeah.
apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Charlie,
How do you tell stolons from rhizomes?
you go to a herbarium and you look at specimens, and you'll see. I mean, rhizomes not necessarily are thick. A lot of them are thick. Stolons can be thick too. It's the question. It's hard. It's hard for me to. Stolons tend to are above ground.
Okay.
Usually, they can be below ground, but they're more likely to be above ground, hugging the ground and setting roots at nodes on the thing. Whereas a rhizome is never above ground; it's always below the ground. So, yeah, I mean, I ponder the same question, and the way I learned that, I mean, they talk about it in the books, like the rhizomes are ascending, or the rhizomes are erect. I mean, it's underground. What do you mean it's erect, like a stem? But if you see the specimen and all the dirt's pulled away from it, it's been washed away, you see that the rhizome is literally below the surface going straight down into the soil, whereas the other ones are like this on an angle, or even coming around like that. And going, so, that's the best place, Charlie.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all right. Yes, Audrey.
One more guy was asking, if they all make chrysanthemum flowers.
Do they all make cleistogamous flowers? No. And on my website, if you go to a page like this page, up at the top, it's going to tell you stones are produced, but I didn't see any about cleistogamous. Some of them do not, but I think a lot of them do, including, like for example, the stemmed violets don't, none of them produce stolons. At least the ones on my list here. None of the stemmed violets produce stolons. Anna.
The question was about cleistogamous flowers, not stone.
Yeah, you're right. The question is about that. Let me see if I can get.
Can you define cleistogamous?
Oh, here you go. On my webpage, I will tell you stolons with cleistogamous flowers from leaf axils. So cleistogamous flowers can grow straight off the rhizome, or they can grow in leaf axils later on in the season. So cleistogamous flowers are flowers that don't open up and they're self-pollinating. They might even be greenish. So on my website, if you're interested about a particular species, go to my website and pull up these pages and it'll tell you. If I know something about it, I'm going to put it there. Yes.
Now that you mentioned cleistogamous flowers, David Warrior told me something interesting about them one time. He said that some people believe that if you take the seeds from the cleistogamous flower and grow them, and it should turn out to be exactly identical to what you had. And if it doesn't, it's a good indication you had a hybrid.
Oh.
Which makes sense. And my favorite one turned out to probably be a hybrid.
Did everybody hear that?
Probably not on-
It was kind of hard for me to explain if, but whether they produce cleistogamous flowers in certain ways or not can tell you whether it's a hybrid or not. In other words, if they're not exact clones of the parent plant, then maybe
the parent
was a hybrid plant. All right, the guy with the cane is coming to take me off the stage. So thank you all.